Fraud's like water. It will find a way to flow, and it will find those little holes. And if you're just completely plugged into one hole, it'll just trickle down and go into that next journey, which in this case was account takeover.
Today's guest is Filip Verley, Chief Innovation Officer at Liminal and a leading voice at the intersection of identity, trust, and fraud. Filip began his career in risk and fraud before going on to build identity products at Google and Airbnb. He helped launch Google's age assurance program at global scale and later led identity checks for all U.S. guests and hosts at Airbnb. At the center of all that work is a simple idea. Identity is the foundation of trust. In this episode, we'll talk about designing defenses across the full identity lifecycle, how identity and fraud are converging, and why the real goal is making fraud expensive and unsustainable. Welcome to DataTalk. I'm Kathleen Peters, Chief Innovation Officer, Experian Identity and Fraud, and your host for the Fraud Frontlines podcast series. Today, we're joined by Filip Verley, Chief Innovation Officer at Liminal, where he leads initiatives to help organizations tackle identity verification and risk management challenges. Filip brings a really unique perspective with his background in criminology and experience at companies like Google and Airbnb. Filip, welcome to the podcast.
Kathleen, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here. Filip, you have had a really fascinating career journey from criminology to risk and fraud, and then into product management at major tech companies. So what first drew you to criminology or linking identity, security? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so coming out of high school, which I won't say when that was, it's been a while. I had to figure out what do I want to study? And so criminology was always a thing that I was really interested in, criminal justice, wanted to try to get into law enforcement.
But let's talk about this for a second. You were not living in the U.S. when you were in high school.
That's right. Exactly. Yes. So I'm originally from Belgium. You probably hear that in my TH and some of my words. You can hear a slight accent. I did not take any training to get rid of the accent. Just fully immersed in the U.S. I came to the U.S. for dual purposes. One was I was able to combine what I really liked doing, which was playing soccer, and go to school at the same time. Because back in those days, in Belgium, you had to pick. You either want to go full-time play soccer or you want to go to college, because you couldn't do both. You were semi-pro. What that really meant was you get paid semi-rate. We were a full-time professional, as in 2 practices a day and everything like that. And so in the U.S., they have this magical thing called scholarships for sports. And I was like, I'll do that one. That's great. Like, I could do both. It's amazing. So came over. Criminal justice was my thing because, like I said, I wanted to try to get into like law enforcement and do all those things. And when you're like 18, 19 years old, you're not fully developed. You're kind of dumb at times. Didn't realize you have to be a citizen to get into law enforcement. Long-winded way of saying I got my degree, which is an awesome subject to do. Got that degree, then had to go find some opportunities to work. And my first opportunity out of school was at a bank doing check fraud prevention. And what I'm saying is check fraud prevention, meaning you were looking at the machine and you were turning the knob where the pictures of the checks were coming in front of you, and you had to decide.
Like on a microfiche or something.
Yes, exactly. Like you had to decide fake or not fake. And imagine how much we've advanced since then. So that's kind of where the criminal justice led into the fraud space.
Wow.
And from there, it took me a little bit of time, obviously, but from there I took other opportunities with companies at e-commerce online, went into the prepaid space, which was really, again, we're talking early 2000s, like 2005, 2008.
Like prepaid
was
cards,
a big thing.
Like prepaid credit card kind of a thing?
Yeah, so it was that, and it was also stored value cards, like the malls. Remember the malls used to have paper certificates, and now they were like, hey, we can give you a Visa or MasterCard backed plastic thing that has a $25 value. And so that's kind of the prepaid, which then led me to, we were building a digital wallet back in 2011, 2012. And so that digital wallet partner of ours at that time was Google. And so we built the original wallet version of Google back in the day.
You
which is
weren't
how I
at
ended up in
Google
big
yet,
tech.
or is that how you got to Google then?
Yes. So I was able to join Google through the acquisition.
I see.
Founders wanted to build this technology and have it used by any and everyone. And Google said, no, we want exclusivity. And they said, great, buy us. Kind of
Wow.
like a bluff. And next thing you know, acquiring happened. And we're on a plane to California from Florida.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now I'm remembering early days. So I didn't realize that you came via this acquisition. That's really fascinating. But some point in that first stint, because we'll talk about how you had a couple of Google opportunities there. In that first time around, you were part of that special innovation team as well, right? Was that right where the acquisition landed you?
So the acquisition landed. So we had headquarters in New York with the company called TXVia, the ones that were acquired. And so all the folks that worked in the New York office were absorbed into the new payments team in Google in the New York office.
Okay.
I was in the Florida office running operations at the time. So I was running operations and all the fraud operations. Think of AML, sanction screening, chargebacks, you name it. That was what we were running down in Florida. And for me, it was, hey, you need to be part of the payments platform team at Google. And that platform team builds for all of Google. So it's not just for Wallet. It's obviously Google makes a lot of money move back and forth. Advertisers pay us. We pay advertisers, YouTube, Play, you name it. There is billions of dollars flowing through this ecosystem. And so the payments platform was responsible to make that work. I got hired as a PM for payments compliance. First one ever at Google because they'd never had a payments compliance product manager. They just had some operational teams. And so when I asked them, I'm like, what does a product manager do? They're like, well, you build journeys. You're the voice of the customer. I'm like,
it's a long road from compliance. I must have felt like it anyway, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, I've been doing that. I'm like, so if I become a product manager, do I also do operations? They're like, no, we have other people do it. I'm like, all right, let's go. Sign me up. That was, the biggest part about fraud is the operational piece, which sometimes becomes a nightmare. So being able to focus on like building products was actually very exciting at that time.
So here you are, you're in this brand new product manager role, the first one you said at Google Payments or Payments and Compliance.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of fraud were you seeing in the early days coming through the doors of Google? I'd be curious. And were you thinking back to criminology and check kiting and all kinds of things like that? Or what were you seeing?
Yeah, the scale is just out of this world. And that was one of the biggest surprises.
Because it's global too, right? Was it global?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just the scale, again, the scale of the operation. So I was on the payments compliance side. We obviously worked very closely with the fraud team because fraud and identity, fraud and compliance,
all goes together.
Very closely connected and, related. And so just understanding the amount of abuse and fraud that was coming in through all of these vectors, from Gmail spam to fake apps on the Play stores, to stealing and hijacking listings on maps, changing phone numbers. It's just the absolute sheer amount of volume which was coming in was unbelievable to watch. And so when I was doing operations at TXVia, which we did a decent amount of money, like we were processing hundreds of millions of dollars a month. And we didn't have any sort of risk engine or like very sophisticated things. So coming into Google, they're like, oh yeah, we, machine learning, we have data scientists. And I'm like, for what? And then you understood the scale and you're like, yeah, you need that. That is really, really a necessity big time. And so just the amount of scams that you can tell is just crazy. It was crazy. One quick anecdote. The most popular locksmith listing is as many A's as you can come up with, because that's the first result that comes out.
It would be first in the phone book kind of thing?
Yes. And the phone book was becoming maps. And so when you were doing like locksmith, lots of A's meant your listing would be popped up. And so folks would hijack each other's accounts. Because what are you going to do when you buy, you call a locksmith? You're going to pay whatever they want because you need to get in the house.
Of course, you're locked out. You need it right now. You're not going to like compare quotes and come back in a few days, are you? So
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. That's really fascinating. So people were hijacking other locksmiths' accounts to get those first clicks. That's crazy.
Right. Or would be posting negative reviews on their competition, would be scaling that up, creating 10 accounts, giving 1 stars. bad service, super expensive, didn't know what they're doing, they ruined my door, things like that. Just any type of scam you can think of, Google was seeing because they provide so much of the internet that it all flows through that ecosystem.
So when you were part of that Google team, were you already leaning more towards some identity specific initiatives, or was it just more part of the overall work?
Yeah. So coming in, payments compliance product manager, because prepaid cards that were reusable had a stored value tied to it.
Right.
That stored value was connected to a bank account. And so when you have a bank account, what do you need to do? You need to do KYC.
Right.
And so that was the initial reason that that role was invented, because they needed someone to manage that part, because it was fully under the banking regulation.
Right.
And so with that, we started doing that because that was the main thing. But then we were realizing, well, identity could be useful across so many other vectors, where we had it done for Wallet. We were doing it for Wallet, but the YouTube team was doing something else for their creators. The Play Store was vetting their own developers. And I'm like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. How do we centralize where you, as a Google consumer, whether you're an advertiser, a publisher, a developer, content creator, if you can verify your identity once, can we then reuse that across the platform? And so the idea was, if we could do that, then the experience gets really, really strong, because now you are interacting with one company and you have to do it only one time, versus if you were a YouTube content creator and you were trending and you had hundreds of thousands of views, advertising money would be given to you.
Right, of course.
For that to happen, you had to become an AdSense publisher. And guess what you had to do? You had to verify your identity again.
Re-verify everything all again.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that
Even
makes no sense.
Still staying on the YouTube use case, you were still having to do those kinds of things again. That's
exactly right. Exactly right. And then the evolution became, yes, we can do identity for KYC purposes, checkbox, but can we also use identity as a catalyst or something that could really improve the experience? While if you do it that way, we also have the benefit of having that centralized system that can now understand the customer journey across all of these products. If we had an issue with fraud, for example, if we would shut down their wallet, their AdSense account would stay open, their YouTube account was still open, because siloed solutions have siloed data who doesn't talk to each other. And so that was the other benefit we got, is like we now have this holistic view across products. It's better experience, better fraud protection. And so we turned identity more into a catalyst for better experiences, which is get good customers through quickly and be able to detect the fraud patterns much faster as well.
So at some point then, Airbnb lured you away. Really interesting company, obviously one which is a big brand name as well. What led you there? The role was a little bit different, right?
Totally. So one of the really cool things about working at big companies, and I'm sure, Kathleen, you know this as well, is you get to establish a big network. Like you work with a lot of folks. I'm going to go on a tangent for 1 second. Every new hire that interviewed at Google as a product manager, I always ask them, hey, what interests you? Oh, I want to go do Play, or I want to go do Android. I want to go work on Waymo. And I'm like, you're early in your career. Don't discount platform teams like payments, because your day is going to be filled with talking to Play, to Android, to Waymo, because you are providing them a service. Right? And so if you're able to connect those dots, you can actually understand, you know what, I really do want to work at Waymo because it's awesome and fun, versus, man, this kind of stinks and I have no options. Open your horizon. Don't think of platform teams as a mess. Think of it as a massive opportunity to, one, totally understand the business as a whole, but then also be able to connect your network across all of these products.
Yes.
And so having said all that, why did I join Airbnb? Someone I worked with joined the team and said, hey, we're going to start an identity team at Airbnb. You should come talk to us. And I said, sure, I'll come talk to you. And they're like, have you ever used Airbnb? First question in the interview. And I said, never. Because I'm like, I hate having to click entire home. I'm not traveling to go stay with someone. And so
Right,
know,
right. Exactly. Yes. You
who
don't want
wants,
to like share the bedroom in the back. You're only going to go there if you've got the
exactly.
place. Oh, I'm with you on that.
Exactly. So that wasn't very in line with the mission at the time, but I got over that speed bump and was able to smooth talk my way into there. But the idea behind the identity team wasn't part of payments. The identity team was in trust and safety. Because if you think about it, Airbnb, what they sell is trust. Because if I asked you, Kathleen, hey, look, you're going to go stay at a house somewhere. Would you rather find that on Craigslist or find that on Airbnb?
Airbnb.
And I think from your reaction, I was going to guess Airbnb. So they sell trust because they've built this community. They've built this system where you can trust. Your eyes won't deceive you. This is the right listing. This is the right host. Good reviews. I'm going to feel confident staying at that place versus Craigslist. It's a blue link. And fingers crossed. So our hypothesis when I joined is identity is the foundation of trust. If you're able to establish one's identity, then you can start layering all these other checks on top of that. Whether that's a background check, a sanctions check, a KYC check, you name it. But if you do not establish that identity, then you're working with garbage data. And the saying, garbage in, garbage out. And so that was the root of what we were pushing is like, if we can establish this identity, we're able to, again, provide better experiences for good customers while also, again, detecting patterns, detecting fraud, detecting suspicious activity, because a name, phone, email, date of birth is not that big an ask for someone to give you. And so if we're able to connect those 4 data elements, we can now establish your identity and figure out what journey we put you on. Do we want to put you on the fast track so you can go book? Or we're like, this information's not fully matching. Let's pull a couple more checks. Let's do a step-up verification.
What was the most critical aspect when you were in that role? Was it vetting guests or vetting hosts?
It was both, because we had the mission that our mission was we need to verify every guest and host in the US as a phase 1, and then we would go global. Now, to do that, our mandate was, hey, trust and safety is super important. We're all about it. And that's honestly very true. We had over 100 people working on it in a company of 3,000. So It's a lot. Like, it's not a small number that's working on that. And so guests and hosts had to be verified. But the kicker was, do not impact nights booked. The number one metric for Airbnb, which I'm sure it still is today, and this was pre-IPO, was we need nights booked to go up. That's our growth.
So don't over decline people. Don't put so much friction or trust and safety in the way that you're affecting the number of bookings, right? That's what they're looking to also protect. Of course. That makes sense.
Exactly. And so the way we pulled that off was we looked at the entire flow. So we mapped the entire flow from you becoming a new guest or host, you just create an account, all the way through you listing your property as a host, or you wanting to book as a guest. And so we realized, one, that journey was really, really difficult. Like, we made it really hard for you to book. It was like 25 steps, which was insane.
Right.
And it had a bunch of teams involved. So the negative for us was we didn't own the flow. We had to go play nice with the guest team. We had to go play nice with the marketing team because they own that journey. And we are inserting a couple screens and steps to try to get the information we needed to do our job. And so that taught me a lot about user experience and understanding how to motivate other teams to work on your problem. And so that was really interesting because we were able to look at the flow and say, why would we want to verify your identity before you've picked the booking, before you picked your property? Why would we want to do that? We wanted to get in the mindset, I'm in the same mindset. I'm on Airbnb and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to Tahiti. And I found an amazing place right on the beach and it has a pool. I'm going to click and say, yes, I'm going to book. Mm-hmm. If I need to do a couple steps after that, I'm going to do that.
But if I can, sold, right? You're already dreaming of being
mentally,
there.
I'm there. I feel like I saw you mentally going to Tahiti as well. I'm
Absolutely.
just saying, right? Exactly. Yeah. And so now, the customer is in the context, the guest is in the context of, I am on the beach, in the waters, in Tahiti, name your cliches of what's happening there. Now I'm going to do a couple steps and say, yes, here's my ID, here's my selfie, get me booked. I want this listing. Versus if I make you do that beforehand, we're going to have massive drop-offs because you're not ready to commit.
Right.
You've
Right.
committed. You're committed to going. That's when we did the triggering for the bookings. And so the big
It's
hesitation was,
really what you're talking about there, Filip. It's really smart because I thought the angle that I thought you were going to take there was that we had to make sure we kept our eye on the top line of numbers of bookings. And so I'm going to think about which of these other checks maybe aren't adding as much value. And so I'll remove some of them. I didn't hear you say that at all. What you did was thought about that user journey, putting me as the consumer already in that place and wanting to be there. You're still doing all of the thorough checks, but I'm a very happy participant because I'm already dreaming of kicking back with a cool drink in my hand and listening to the waves. And so you need a few more things? Absolutely. Click, click, as opposed to thinking about what, I don't want to say shortcuts, but maybe optimizations would have been made. You guys thought about it in a completely different way.
yeah. And when you're setting up your account, you're naturally giving us information. And we're like, why are we not using that? Let's at least start using the name you provided, the phone number, the date of birth. And so behind the scenes, we knew that we needed to upgrade and expand our coverage. So we needed to go find vendors that had telco data. We had to go find vendors that were able to collect after the flow documents and selfies. Because our purpose was, if you're going to give us the information, we got to do all we can to try to get that through.
Right. You can do a
And
lot of silent authentication
100%.
on that phone number, on the email address. Yes, that makes a ton of sense.
And so that was the kicker, where we were using what was collected. And again, that's something that still holds true today. You can't just look at one or two things. You got to look at the entire picture. A lot of our flows were intent-based, meaning Kathleen's in a Facebook group. Again, I'm dating myself. I don't think anybody's in Facebook groups anymore. But you're in a Facebook group that is a travel group. Airbnb obviously advertised to those groups. And you click on an ad because you want to go to Tahiti. You click on an ad. Now we have real intent. You clicked on our ad from a channel that we trust.
Right.
So now we have that already. So now we feel comfortable that you are most likely not going to commit any sort of fraud or abuse on the booking. And so we will be able to say, okay, let's get her through quickly and get her through all the way through. But let's say you come in and you are www.airbnb.com and your IP range doesn't match the region that you told us you're from. That becomes a little bit more suspicious. Now we're going to monitor that a little more closely and figure out, well, we collect the data. What else should we collect? Or should we let them go through and make a booking or friction them in advance? So the intent of you coming in was also a big decision about what type of friction we would throw on the customer.
Makes sense. Makes sense. The journey that got you there gives you a risk indicator itself in terms of the risk associated with what we do next.
That's right.
I'm curious, as the time you spent at Airbnb, so over that career journey time that you spent, how did you see fraud evolve? And I know you've been gone there for a little bit now as well. How do you think the fraud has changed, especially in a property like Airbnb?
Again, I feel like it's still going to be the same thing that's happening now that was happening back then. You had to make sure that you were very coordinated between trust and safety. That if you were to tighten down account onboarding, account takeovers would become more prevalent because it was too hard to create new accounts, but it was still pretty easy to take over an account. Now, if you adjusted that one, then the fraudster would try to come into the account opening flow again. So you have to balance your fraud prevention checks across your entire life cycle, the identity life cycle. Because if you don't, you're unintentionally going to create a gap. Because fraud's like water. It will find a way to flow. And it will find those little holes. And if you're just like completely plugged into one hole, it'll just trickle down and go into that next journey, which in this case was account takeover. So what we saw a lot of scaled abuse where folks were trying to take over accounts, reset passwords. And then when we tightened that down, we saw them come into the account opening side. And we saw the exact same faces, the exact same actors now trying to create all of these accounts. And so
when they were creating accounts, were they creating accounts as hosts? Think about AI now and all the concern, especially recently over generative AI deep fakes. But I feel like in the property segment and listings, the fake property listings have probably been there for a long time before ChatGPT.
Yes. Now I can only imagine how good they look.
Right.
Back then it was you go to Zillow or Red Door or Redfin, whatever, name your favorite real estate website, and you would download all the photos of a listing.
I see.
And then you would say, hey, here's my listing. Come stay at my beautiful mansion. And it was really a fake listing. And the idea was that the hosts that did that, the fraudsters did that, were going to try to take you off platform, meaning, hey, Kathleen, you know what? It's $300 a night, but I charge $300 a night because I got to pay Airbnb. I forget what the percentage was.
Right.
X percent. For you, if you pay me directly, I'll do it for $225 a night. And you're
So
like,
then they get you out of the loop of all of the trust, right? And the trust and safety measures and the fraud prevention and the authentication, and they're taking you down a different path.
so if you pay me, Kathleen, with a Green Dot gift card,
Sure.
I will lock this listing for you. You're like, great. You pay it. You go on your vacation. The address is not right. The house doesn't exist. And now you're in deep trouble because you're somewhere else and your vacation's ruined.
But the guest is probably still angry at Airbnb to some degree, right? Because
100%. Why did you make this? Why did you let this happen? I booked a real listing in my mind. Like, how did that happen?
Sure. Wow.
And so there's a lot of that type of abuse. And also on the guest side, there's a lot of abuse where, folks pretending they're a family and they're not, and they're throwing a rager.
Oh,
and you come home, your cleaning crew comes in after the weekend, and your house is destroyed.
Wow. Well, fraud continues to persist. It takes different shapes and forms. It isn't different yet the same in every industry, isn't it? So
Yes.
These stories are so fascinating. Thank you for sharing all of those too. You made your way back to Google again, convinced to come over there and especially look at this area of age assurance. And I think this is a really fascinating and unique area. And I know it's one that you're passionate and you're expert in, Filip, and that you've continued to study even as you've joined the Liminal team.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe let's start by giving a little bit of education. So frame it for us. How should we be thinking about age assurance, especially in the digital age, digital transactions? Where does it matter?
So, all right. So I'll tell you the story how I actually ended up in age assurance.
Yes, please.
So I joined Google. I rejoined Google again. Someone I worked with said, hey, I'm going into the identity team at Google. And the funny thing about Google is there's at least 7 identity teams at Google, and they all believe they own the customer's identity.
Yes.
When that person told me I'm going into the identity team, I was like, huh, what are you going to do there? He's like, we want to connect. We want to connect your...
I've been there.
Exactly. We're going to connect your physical identity to your digital identity and become like the passport, your passport, your digital passport, and your physical passport. And so that was kind of what drew me to it. And so I started working on the Google sign-in product, which was all about, using your Google account to sign in on third-party properties, like a Pinterest, you name it, like sign in with Google.
Right.
And so we wanted to connect your real identity
Sure.
to that and then be able to share more attributes for you to be more trusted on these third-party surfaces. I was sitting next to another product manager, James Kiddock, shout out James, who had this age assurance thing pop up. And he's like, hey, you worked on trust and safety issues at Airbnb, right? I'm like, yeah, for sure. He's like, all right, I'm going to bring you into this meeting. I'm like, okay, great. Come in the meeting. Next thing I know, James is like, and Filip's going to take care of this. And so that's kind of how I ended up in the age assurance world. And so why is that important? The internet never had an identity layer. When the internet was built, there was no identity layer. And now, what is this now? 30, 40 years later? I don't even know how long the internet's been around. It's been a while. Finally starting to figure out, hey, that's not really sustainable. And now if you're looking back 5 years ago versus now, it's even wilder. Like you can't even trust what's real anymore on the internet. So you need to not have an identity. You just need proof of humanness. Can you actually establish this person's a human or not? So even in the last 5 years, it's gone crazy. It's gone just like very much evolved. But on the age side, it doesn't make sense that everything's just out there for everyone to consume. Why aren't there some sort of restrictions, especially for children and underage, like under the age of 18? Why do they?
In the
why
real
is there
life
no
world
limits?
too, we're used to this with like purchasing alcohol or being able to do gambling, for example. And so as people are doing more and more of these things online, at least for those sorts of things, there's certainly an expectation, right, to prove you're an adult.
Exactly. You and I could walk into Safeway My kids can walk into Safeway, no big deal. But when they get into the alcohol lane or alcohol aisle, they have to push the button to get help. Guess who's not getting that? They're not getting that.
The kids. Right.
You know,
Exactly.
and again, not to date myself, but anytime somebody says that, they date themselves. So I'm going to date them anyways. Remember the video stores, like when you used to go rent videos or DVDs, a la Blockbuster.
Sure.
Again, anyone could walk in there, but there was always this restricted area in the back that was over 18 or over 21, which was your adult content. Kids could walk into the video store, get their own thing, but they weren't allowed into the back part. And that's really, if you think about the internet, it should be very similar to that.
Right.
And so that's where these age restrictions are starting to come in, not just from like, hey, this content is not deemed appropriate for children. It's also social media now has come into the fold. And I want to say it was 2 years ago, maybe, that the Surgeon General mentioned that social media is harmful to children's development. That kickstarted the next wave.
Australia. Yes. Yeah. Look
Exactly.
at Australia and the recent legislation there. Right. I forget what the age is. Is it 12, 13, 14? Do you know in Australia?
You have to prove you're over the
saying?
age of 16.
16. Wow. Now, I think about that, and there are technologies which can either capture your government document, you can prove your date of birth. There are even age estimation capabilities that are looking at your image and doing some biometrics and are remarkably good at doing that. I would think that there's probably some combination of the efficacy of that tech as well as privacy rules that would make it easier to check whether people are 21 as opposed to checking whether people are over, say, 12 or something like that. Are there different companies that are specializing on this, or where are some of the speed bumps that the content providers or social media companies are hitting when they try to solve or even comply with these rules, right?
Yeah, for sure. And anytime you put in an age assurance restriction, and you're saying, hey, you must prove you're over a certain age, it does not just impact that group. It impacts everyone. So again, if we look at Australia and the social media bill, under 16, you must prove you're over the age of 16. But guess what? If you're over the age of 16, you must prove you're over the age of 16. And so every adult has to prove the same thing. So these laws are not just for children, they're for everyone in that community. So that's one thing you got to remember. It's not just impacting a group, it's impacting the entire country. And so one of the things that was really difficult for us is the difficulty was that we have to balance finding the right folks to limit, as in kids, versus not impacting the experience for adults, known adults. And so understanding how you could do that was really hard because there is really not a lot of checks out there that could do those things. Now, vendors have really advanced and there's a ton of new solutions that are really more appropriate for this use case. And there's two things we're seeing: a diversity of options. So beyond selfie and GovID, you have folks that can do phone checks. You have email checks. You have a bone density check, voice patterns. So there's a variety of things now that you can kind of prove your age. And the second thing that we're seeing, which is a massive shift from, again, 4 or 5 years ago, is everybody speaking the same language as far as these must be privacy forward / privacy preserving.
I was going to ask you about that, privacy preserving. I feel like that is a component that is a silver lining about all of these efforts as well. Even if I do want to buy a nice bottle of champagne at the grocery store, for example, why does the grocery store need to know my exact birthday and all of my PII that's on my driver's license? Makes me nuts when they actually want to scan it. I know they're doing that to make sure it's not a stolen ID, but it's like, come on. So I like these privacy preserving approaches.
They all have now machines that they either scan it on the back. They have the IDEMIA machines. Hey, you know what, Bevmo? I've been here a bunch of times. I have my phone number. How many times do I have to show you my ID? So it's absolutely, to your point, it's a good side effect that we're more and more talking about. How do we give the user choice, options, like give them the options on how they establish their age, as well as how do we provide that in a privacy forward manner where only certain elements are provided. And so for us, again, at Google, it was a big deal that we don't need to know your age.
Right.
We don't care that your date of birth is March 9th or whatever. We just need to know, are you over 18?
Right.
And that's it. I don't care if you're 25, 35, 45, not my ball of wax.
Well,
I
you don't
just want to
even want it,
understand that.
right? Because then you have
No.
to show that you are compliant in having that data, seeing that data, knowing that data, and then that's going to trigger a whole lot of other activities and requirements.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right.
So as you then more recently moved to Liminal, so first I should probably start, to me, Liminal is a household name. Obviously, folks who are working in identity are very familiar with Liminal, but for the audience here, which is broader, talk a little bit about Liminal in terms of its mission. I know the company has really been growing, especially over the last couple of years. It's been growing as it's added your role and function. I know you've continued a lot of the age assurance capability, but even more in terms of focus areas. But introduce us a little bit to Liminal first, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. So Liminal is a market intelligence firm. Our mission statement is to empower every company to outperform their ambitions through actionable intelligence. So we sit in that domain where we sit in between, used to call it identity or digital identity, but that got too narrow. So we are in the regulatory compliance, trust and safety, risk management, cybersecurity area. And so those are our big universes that we really focus on. So imagine that you have other players that go very wide and horizontal. We go extremely vertical in our knowledge there. And so we provide real-time actionable intelligence that, again, helps every customer make smarter decisions, move faster, and win with confidence.
And definitely there's a common thread of identity, which is at the core of all of that.
Identity is that middle point. It's that foundation. And if you think about one of the things for 26 that we're really pushing on is convergence, fraud, and authentication. By the way, I've coined a new term, froth, fraud.
Fraud and
AML.
authentication.
Exactly.
We'll try to get that to stick.
Cybersecurity and identity and fraud teams. Like all of these teams are trying to converge and figure out how do we work better together because we are facing a unified fraud front. These folks that are trying to scam you, take your money, take your data, whatever it is, they don't have an org chart where I need to make sure I play nice with Kathleen because Kathleen's in fraud and Filip is in identity. And we got to make sure that we align our roadmaps. They don't care about that. I'm going to try to get into your weakest point and try to take as much money as I can. So convergence is really a big opportunity that we're seeing in 26 where folks are overwhelmed with fraud today because of the generative AI and just the scale and, it's scaled, it's cheap, and it's amazingly sophisticated.
Yes, yes. I talk about that a lot as I'm speaking with clients and as I'm having the opportunity to do public speaking about how organized, motivated, and frankly, innovative the fraudsters are. And we cannot take that for granted, especially with all of the new tools and the empowerment that they're getting from the latest Gen AI tools. It's helping them perpetuate these frauds at scale. To that
Yeah,
end,
imagine, right, Kathleen, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you wanted to get a fake ID,
right?
$30, $50, $100 for a really good one. Fast forward to this week, you can go to Nana Banana, the Gemini tool. You upload a template and say, please add in this information, a white male between the ages of 35 to 45 with glasses, and also generate me a photo for that and a selfie that is able to move left and right, up and down. For what? 15 cents, 20 cents. It's just the sophistication is amazing and the cost has gone down so much.
So what's good here too is that there are a number of technology companies that are emerging, that are getting funding, that are coming into the space. One of the things that I love that you've done at Liminal is done a demo day, a pitch day of sorts, where you're showcasing a curated list of companies in this space. What kind of tech or capability are you most excited about, given the history, given what you've seen, and what you know companies like Airbnb and Google are looking for? What gets you excited?
What gets me excited is folks that have taken the entire approach. A lot of times you will see companies that are very laser focused on one use case or trying to solve one issue. You got to expand. And so we are seeing a lot of companies that are, especially on the AI, again, I'll go back on AI. We had a deepfake demo days this week. And so one thing that was really good to see is almost every single vendor mentioned AI is going to fight each other. Bad AI gets better, good AI gets better and better and better. But it's all of the data and the signals around it, that probabilistic information device intelligence, behavioral biometrics, all of that. You need to see the entire picture versus focusing on, is this a fake or not? That's going to be really hard to detect. You got to look at the entire picture. And so that's what's really interesting is folks that are looking at, how do I supplement what I can do really well with additional pieces of data so I can solve my buyer's massive pain point of this scaled fraud.
That is really important, that approach of having to take a layered approach, understanding the whole picture doesn't change. And if anything, it's probably more important than ever, given the circumstances that we're at now. Filip, if you could give one piece of advice to fraud prevention teams today, or to the entities within businesses that are thinking about these new types of attacks, thinking about your experience, and even drawing on your criminology background and passion, what piece of advice would you give to those teams today?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot before we were talking. The goal is not to eliminate all fraud. That's unrealistic. So don't set yourself up for that. Don't think you're going to eliminate every single piece of fraud. It's, your goal should be, how do you make fraud more expensive, inconvenient, and not sustainable for that fraudster? That's really what you're trying to do, while making sure that you keep trust and the experience extremely high for your real users that are not going to get impacted by your checks and everything like that. And if I boil that down, it's like, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the slowest person in your group.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's good advice. I think that is very good advice that, like you said, fraud tends to flow to where it's easiest to flow, and it will find it. And if you put up the right roadblocks, the fraud is going to go elsewhere. In the end,
one more thing,
everything.
Kathleen, sorry, one more thing I wanted to mention too is and you don't know everything. If you are in industry groups, talking to people like yourself, learn, share, understand, listen. There is so much knowledge and information between buyers and vendors you should tap into, because you, Kathleen, are seeing this across all your customers. Me at a company,
Yes.
I'm just seeing my issue. So be willing to learn, share, listen.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. What I find, even as Experian, when we bring together our subject matter experts from our top customers and we bring folks like you to the table for our advisory boards, there's so much sharing, especially when it comes to fraud. I do appreciate and am grateful that a lot of leaders see not another bank or another retailer as their competition when it comes to fraud, but it's the fraudsters, it's the bad guys. So how do we collectively turn our sights on stopping this fraud? And there is a really great community around sharing this information and trying to make the world a better place for all of us. I think it's great advice to encourage people to open up and do that, because this is changing so fast, the landscape. We need to benefit from that collective knowledge. Filip, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time today, for sharing your insights and having this discussion with me and talking about how identity is really at the heart of trust and safety, and sharing with your perspective about the innovation and staying ahead and working together on this.
Total pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you. And for our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Liminal and Filip's work, please check out the links in our show notes. And as always, thank you so much for joining us on Experian's Fraud Frontline podcast series, and we will see you next time.